Hi, it's Graham. This is a short follow-up on the effector I developed for my Predator that allows me to fit a Mosquito clone hotend, as you can see here. This is the whole effector assembly with the Mosquito mounted into it, cooling fans and the like. What I've done, in addition to the very early version, is now this is the Magball one. I have actually added these extra support spars across each of the arms. I've also included some additional holes that reduce the weight. So even though there is more materials for these arms, the overall weight is only increased by about 1 gram from the original one that I created. There are two versions of this. This takes Magball arms, and there is another version here that can take the conventional arms that come with the Predator, but you can also later on, if you wish to add Magball arms to it, and I provide these as well, you can screw on these adapters, and it's all aluminium, and they allow you to then put Magball arms onto this same effector, or you can then switch back to the conventional arms if you like. The assembly instructions for both versions of these is ostensibly the same in mounting the fans and the like. As you can see here you've got the front bracket that mounts the clone Mosquito, which slides up there, and then you've got the two cooling fans that are mountable on that. Now, what I've also done with the cooling fans is I've allowed for both a 20mm and a 10mm fan. Now, the way the 10mm fan works and the 20mm fan works is the airflow coming out of them is in a slightly different position. So what I've done is I've allowed for two sets of holes to mount either fan so that the airflow is directly going into the ducts for cooling. That's also a new modification to the new effector. So what I've done is I've created a lot of still images of how this is all assembled, both versions, and there's about 30 something images, I think, or maybe even more. They are included in the description, and there is a link to where you can download those images from. The first thing is to mount the Mosquito hot end onto the front support bracket, and that is done with two 20mm long M3 screws and two 4mm long spacers, so that it positions everything exactly right. That is then attached to the front support bracket. That can go either way around. It's completely symmetrical, so it doesn't really matter. And the Mosquito mounts into the two holes there. I think you might be able to see these two there. You can't get that wrong because it can only go in one way. Then you just nip those up. You don't need to over tighten it. I use this, and that's as much tight as it needs to be. Got to remember that you're screwing into aluminium, so if you were to use this type of hex Allen key and you really hung a lot of weight on that to do that, it might strip the thread, but just have it nice and firm. Some people might want to use a little bit of Loctite on their thread just so that it doesn't come loose. I've never had one come loose yet, but it just might be a good idea. Use blue Loctite because it's temporary, so that later on, if you need to remove this and replace it, you can do that quite easily. Once you've got that done, lay that down there. You've got, it's a design for a 30mm by 10mm fan. The original cooling fan that's designed for the Mosquito is, I think, about 25 millimeters, and it uses those two screws to hold the fan on. I decided with mine I'd choose a larger fan. That then is held on, I think these screws are 18 millimeters M3s. Now, I've allowed for all 4 screws to mount the fan, but really you only need the 2 top screws. That's going to be ample to hold the fan. When you put it on, have the wire facing towards the top end, and you do that up. Again, just nice and firm, and you can go through later on and just tighten all these up when the whole thing's assembled. So that's the first part of the assembly. Mosquitoes can vary in what you get. I found that some clones come with a hole that goes straight through there, which is 3 millimeters diameter. So an M3 screw passes straight through it, which is then attached to my mounting bracket in a normal way, as I've shown before. However, some clone Mosquitoes come with an M2.5 tapped hole in there, and in that case the M3 screw won't pass straight through to sort of mount in the normal way. So with those clone Mosquitoes, generally you will get some M2.5 screws that will go into there. So you can use those. All is not lost. What you'll find is that even though I've drilled and tapped the normal mounting to be M3 or 3 millimeters for 3 millimeter screws, an M2.5 will pass straight through it. And you'll also find that one side of this is slightly recessed, so that when you put the M2.5 screw in, it fits into that recess. So use that side. Then all you've got to do is put the other one in on that side. Use the same 2 spacers, and then take the clone Mosquito, and I'll get it the right way around, that way around, and you can then put those through there, and you'll be able to screw up the Mosquito end to the bracket, and it all looks pretty much the same as the one that I did here previously. So that's how you mount it. You just go in from the opposite direction. So instead of the screw coming in from this direction, screwing into the mounting bracket, it is just done the opposite way around. Then when you mount the fan, you may notice that the heads of these screws are still a little proud, and if you mounted your cooling fan for the Mosquito the wrong way around, say that way with the label out, that in doing it that way the air is flowing back out, you'll find that they will catch on these. The correct way to mount the fan is this way, with the air coming in from this direction and blowing out back through, and mounting in that direction there is clearance for the fan to rotate. You've just got to be aware that there are normally spars on here, so you just orient that in a way that those spars don't come into contact with those, and there is a way of doing it. With this fan it's just that way, and then all you do is just use the normal mounting screws that are provided, which are M3. These fans are generally got a 3 millimeter hole, and you screw that up, once we find the threaded hole for that. And that's it, away you go, and the fan rotates quite freely. So that's just the alternate way that you would mount your Mosquito if it comes provided with threaded M2.5 holes. Now, the alternative, which I have also done, is basically just to drill these holes out 3mm and then mount it in the way that I've shown in an earlier part. So there's a couple of options. You can use the existing M2.5 threaded holes, or you can just drill those out with a 3mm drill. Takes all of about a minute, and just mount it in the same way that I previously mounted this one. The next thing to do is to attach the two cooling part fan mounts onto the main effector, and each one of these is different, so they'll only go in one way. The outside flat surface faces towards the outside of the effector, so if you position your effector in that position there, you will find that will drop into the slot on that side, and you can see how that's done there. They are secured with, I think these are about 6 or 8mm long M3 screws. And they're countersunk, and they're specifically countersunk so later on when you mount the part cooling duct, it sits flush with the effector. So we put both of those in. I'm just doing these up loosely by hand for a start. I'll go through and tighten up all screws up later. Then you've got that, and this mounting bracket fits on this way. There's a little notch in there so that it overhangs, and that will go in there. Again, we've got two countersunk screws going in here. The second one in. Go up. Once you've got that loosely done, I normally just go through with this type of Allen key. Just again, be careful not to over tighten and strip the threads. It would take a fair amount of force to actually do that, but it just needs to be firm. Again, you could use a little bit of blue loctite on those if you needed to. So we've got it done like that. You'll notice that these brackets are offset. The reason for that is I've designed it for the two types of fans. One is the original 10mm fan that comes with the Predator as original. I think it's the model number of that is 4010, and also you've got the bigger 20mm fan. Now, the reason that's slightly offset is it allows for two lots of holes. You'll see that I've got up here two lots of mounting holes in different positions. That's because when these two fans sit like that together, you'll notice that the air outlet is offset differently. So I've done it in a way that when you mount the 10mm fan on, you would use one set of screw holes, and that lines up directly over where the ducts are going to go. But when you mount a 20mm fan, it has to be different, because if you mounted it using the same holes as the 10mm fan, you can see there it's offset. So the other set of holes is, and the reason these two brackets are offset is so that you can move that across, and then the outlet from this fan lines up perfectly with the part cooling duct that you're going to fit later on. So what you can do now, if you're going to use, say, these 20mm fans, they are secured with, these are 18mm M3 screws, and that mounts in that position. Oh, wrong one. So line it up with the right holes. And there we go with that. As the wires sort of facing towards the back, you can put screw in there like that. You can do those up, and there is the ability to put another screw in here, which I happen to have down here. So there's a position for another screw. The 10mm fans, you may have to drill the holes out, because I think they come with, some of them come with 2.5mm holes for 2.5mm screws, but I've allowed or done M3 threaded position, so you just might have to, if you've got these ones, drill them out and use M3 screws, and you will use obviously a shorter screw for this type of fan because of the way that it mounts differently. I don't provide the screws for mounting these fans. You'll have to provide that yourself depending on what fan you're going to secure onto it. However, with these ones, it allows for 4 screws. These only provide and allow for 3 screws. So you attach those. You would then, where's my other one? Here it is. Attach the other fan. And I'm not going to be too fussed putting all the screws in on this, but I'll just put a couple in just so you can see how it all comes together. It's in the right position. I think personally the 20mm fan is a better idea for when you're using the Mosquito hot end, because it can run at high temperatures, and it just gives you the option to get a bit more cooling if you need it, but that's entirely up to you. So that's with the 2 fans mounted. Now the only other part to do is to secure the Mosquito hot end section into this assembly. That's easily done by literally dropping that in, and that also fits into a recessed slot, so you can't go wrong, you can't get it out of position, and that just slots in there, and that's secured. There are slightly oval holes for mounting this, so that you've got a little bit of lateral movement if you need to line it up to be exactly center. That doesn't need countersunk screws because these screws don't get in the way of the part cooling duct when it's put into place. Now that they just go in like so. You do that up, and the other side will mount in there, and that's all secure. So that's basically it. Now, attaching the level sensor holder, the one I provide has got magnets in it, so it grips pretty firmly to the existing level sensor that's supplied with the Predator. So to start with, click that in and then just check to see what the gap is between the tip of the nozzle and the bottom of the level sensor. And with this one, it's about a 2mm or so difference in height, so I can't get this all the way in. In that case, what I've got is some spacers here, and I provide STLs for you to download these. There's a 2mm and a 1.5mm spacer. So first of all, I'll just check out the 2mm one. I just drop it on there and see what the gap is that I've got, and that's a little bit more than what I need, so I'll take the 1.5 and I think that'll be the one that I need. So now I just will use a 1.5mm spacer to space it out, put the screw in there. These are M3 screws. I think I provide 8mm long ones. So we'll drop the first one in. The sensor holder that I provide is machined with slots in it so that it makes it adjustable, unlike the one that comes with the Predator, which is not adjustable at all, but it was never made to be used for any other purpose than with the Predator effector. I make mine a little bit more universal than that, so we now do up our 3mm screw here. I can possibly get that lined up, and I just leave it a little loose to start with, and then I'll push this all the way in as far as it can go. Now, if you've got a sock on your hot end, you won't be able to get this in quite as far because of the thickness of the sock. But if you don't, you'll be able to get it in a little bit further. So you just push this up as far as it will go, and then make sure that it's all straight and square, and then do these screws up nice and firmly. And in this one, there's still just a slight gap between the tip of the nozzle and the bottom of this, but it's very secure anyway. So the other thing you'll notice is the fact that the tip of the nozzle and the micro switch is around about 4mm out of center. It's absolutely not necessary at all for this micro switch to line up with the center of the nozzle. Some people believe that it has to be to do proper bed level sensing, but it doesn't, because if you remember when you watch the probe, it jumps by about 65mm steps forward and back. So the fact that this is slightly out from the center makes absolutely no difference to the bed level sensing at all. And I've done it many times and I've not found any issue with it. So that's the way it goes. Now you can just pull that off and put it back on again. STLs for these spacers are downloadable, and there'll be a link in the description where you can download all the relevant assembly files for this. I've got STLs for a 2mm one and a 1.5mm one, as I'm using on this. But if you really want to adjust it, you can adjust this in your slicer height setting so that you can get it exactly what you want. What you would do next as the final stage is to fit the cooling ducts, and I do provide for download my slightly modified version of duct, or it's a standard version that's available on Thingiverse, but I just shift the height a little bit because I use 5mm thick aluminium for mine. The original Predator uses 6mm, so you just have to adjust the height of this part to suit. But the mounting hole positions for mine are the same as the original Predator. So you can see here why we've got countersunk screws there. So that sits flush, and then that then mounts on to the top of that. I provide black screws for this so it identifies them, and I don't need to put all of these in, but that screws up, and you can do the other screws in there and position that, and that all lines up, and you find that the height of this sort of matches fairly well with the position that it needs to be in. You'll also notice that it sits down nicely against the cooling fan outlets in there. So that's basically the entire assembly done, and everything's in position. Now, and obviously you would do your wiring and put your connectors on to sort of suit, but I'm not going to go into details on that. I hope that helps assemble my effector, and you find it works well for you. All right, thanks for watching. Attaching the original arms to the effector is the same as it would normally be, with one addition. Countersunk screws, they're 20 millimeters long. I provide those. The additional part required is it's a 3 millimeter spacer that's also provided. That goes on towards the effector side, and then it's just a matter of screwing this up and securing it firmly. Now, the important thing is don't over tighten it. If you're afraid of it coming loose, use a bit of Loctite, but just firm. You've got to remember that this part is aluminium, and too much pressure, the thread will strip very easily. This is the best type of Allen key to use to tighten it up. Try to avoid using this type where you're going to put that in there and apply a lot of strength to the end of that. The amount of torque that that's providing is quite significant, and that will easily strip the thread. If you go to use this type of Allen key, make sure you use it this way so that you minimize the amount of torque and the risk of stripping the thread. And that's got complete movement that's required as normal. So one on each side, and there we go. If you want to attach mag balls to the conventional arm effector, that's quite simple. These are the adapters. They mount from the underside. They can actually mount from either side, but I tend to prefer to mount them from the underside of the effector. That's the side that doesn't have the fan brackets, and literally place that on there. These holes are slotted just to allow for a little bit of movement, and then there are small stainless steel button head screws. One goes on each side of that. Do that up, and there's another one on the other side. Do that up. Now leave it a little loose. You'll see there's a slight amount of movement there, so you can just allow it to be centralized. I just normally eyeball it center, but you can measure it with calipers if you want to make sure it's right. And there you go. And then the mag ball literally just, as normally, screws down into that all the way up. And I provide these threaded. A lot of the original ones you would print would be not threaded, they'd be straight through and you use a nut on the other side. Now I tend to just do that up firmly with my finger, and then I still put a nut on this side just to lock it into position, and then if you want to you can trim off the excess. It just depends on what mag ball you get, but these are 3mm ones and they screw on, and I always provide threaded holes. With my effectors I use actually a 4mm mag ball with an internal thread. I find these are much higher quality than some of the ones that you get with the actual magnets. That way I then just have, I have a 4mm hole, and I put a screw in that as such, and then the mag ball goes on that, and then I would do that up. Trying to do this so you can see what I'm doing. And then that's secured, and that's the way I do it. Now you could easily modify these to take a 4mm mag ball like I've got here, just by literally drilling out the existing threaded 3mm hole to 4mm. Okay.